All right, let's jump into this one. We're taking a deep dive into something a little different today, a wedding trend that's causing quite a stir. It's called trash the dress photography.
It definitely seems to be sparking a lot of conversation.
Yeah, we've got a whole pile of articles here and some pretty strong opinions on social media about this trend. So yeah, we've definitely got a lot to unpack.
It's a good one. It's going to be interesting.
So for our listeners who maybe haven't heard of this, trash the dress. Imagine this. Instead of carefully preserving that, pristine white gown, brides are taking it for one last wild ride.
Yeah.
We're talking about like in the mud, in the ocean. We even saw some where they were setting it on fire. It's a pretty wild departure from how we traditionally think about wedding dresses.
Absolutely. I mean, the contrast is really at the heart of this whole trend, isn't it? It's all about kind of like visually going against those expectations, creating something unexpected. And some people see it as a really liberating thing.
Yeah. And the articles you sent, they had some incredible visuals, brides wading into these like crashing waves, posing in front of all this crazy graffiti. Like it's definitely not something you'd see in your grandma's wedding album.
Right, exactly.
So where did this whole thing even come from?
Well, that's a little tricky. Pinning down the exact origin is some of the articles point to a photographer, John Michael Cooper, in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Back in 2001. He might have been one of the first.
I was going to say, but there's that scene from like way back, Sunset Beach, I think it was, in 1998.
Yeah.
Where Meg Cummings, after this huge breakup, she just runs straight into the ocean in her wedding dress.
Right, right. So the whole idea of using a wedding dress for this kind of dramatic effect, outside of a traditional ceremony, it's been around, it seems like, for a while, before this trash the dress trend even had a name.
Yeah. It makes you think, like, maybe it's tapping into something deeper. This whole idea of, like, using the wedding dress to express emotions, like heartbreak or even just like a sense of moving on, closing a chapter.
Yeah, exactly. A sense of closure or even defiance in a way.
Okay, so speaking of strong emotions, you mentioned the social media commentary, right?
Oh, yes.
Safe to say, people have some thoughts.
Definitely very divided.
Yeah,
some people are all for it. They see it as this like fun, empowering way to kind of mark a new chapter or even just like take control of the whole wedding narrative.
Yeah.
And then you have others who are like, this is just wasteful or disrespectful even. Some are even saying it's just attention seeking.
Yeah, and I saw one comment, someone called it a stupid TikTok trend, which I think says a lot about, maybe how different generations view this whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to see how this one trend can tap into so many different values, and interpretations. But before we, dive into the ethics of it all, I'm kind of curious, like, what are the reasons someone would even, like, want to do this? Why trash this thing that's, so symbolic?
Yeah, it often, like, really expensive. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack that. Okay, so trash the dress. Definitely controversial. But I think what's really interesting is, like, why are people drawn to this? Like, what's the deeper reason behind it?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Like, what's going on there? Well, one thing that comes up a lot in these articles, this idea of transformation.
Okay, yeah.
It's almost like a visual way to kind of mark that change from being single to married or even, just moving from one stage of life to the next.
So it's like, I'm closing this chapter and I'm not afraid to, let go of the past, embrace something new.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me think about, how wedding traditions in general, they're always evolving, right?
Right.
As society changes, the way we mark these big milestones, that changes too.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, maybe trash the dress is just their way of like making it personal, breaking free from all those expectations.
Yeah, and you can't deny, like, the photos are amazing. It's a chance to get creative and really capture a different side of the whole wedding thing.
Totally. It's definitely not your typical, like, posed wedding photo.
Yeah.
There's this, like, energy and spontaneity that comes across.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the articles mentioned couples, like, recreating their trash the dresses photos years later.
Oh, wow.
Like, as an anniversary thing.
That's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Although we do have to, bring up the fact that it's not all, like, fun and games, right?
Right.
There was that article about Maria Pantazopoulos in Canada.
Yeah, a tragic story. In 2012, she actually drowned during a trash the dress shoot, which is, a reminder that a wet wedding dress, those currents, it can be really dangerous.
Absolutely. Safety has to come first.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a reminder that even when you're trying to be spontaneous and, let loose, you still have to plan things out and be aware of the risks.
And I think there were a few other stories too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There were other incidents, near drownings. It's definitely something to take seriously.
So all this brings up another side of the whole debate, the concern about, is it wasteful? What about the environmental impact of just like trashing a perfectly good dress?
Yeah, for sure. That's a big part of the conversation. Some people see it as really irresponsible,
Mm.
especially when you think about how much wedding dresses cost and the fact that you could donate it, help someone out.
Yeah, that's a good point. But there were some counter arguments too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Some people pointed out that, some brides are using cheaper dresses for these shoots, or even secondhand ones.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And others just feel like, at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. It's their dress, their expression. They should be able to do what they want with it.
It all goes back to that social media debate. Like, is it about empowerment? Is it attention seeking? Is it just a celebration? Is it just a stunt? It depends who you ask.
It really does. And I think that's okay. It's a complicated issue. There's not really like a simple answer. What matters is that we're actually, thinking about it right.
Yeah.
Engaging with these questions and figuring out what it all means to us.
So after hearing all of this, what are your thoughts? Where do you land on this? So we've really gone deep on this trash the dresses thing, huh? What's like the biggest thing that sticks out to you from all this?
Honestly, it's kind of wild how one, simple act can create such a huge range of reactions. Like people are seeing this in so many different ways.
Yeah. I guess it shows how like traditions change over time and how everyone's got their own unique perspective on things, their own values.
Totally. I mean, we've touched on so much, like the art of it, the environmental impact, the whole personal freedom thing, safety. I mean, it's a lot.
It really is. And I think it's worth saying again, like, this is just based on what we've seen in these specific articles, right?
Yeah.
There's always like a whole other layer to explore. We could go even deeper into like the whole history of wedding dresses, or even look at like, why people do rituals and like the psychology of symbols and stuff. That could be a whole other deep dive.
For sure. There's always more to discover.
Okay, well, before we totally go down that rabbit hole, I want to bring it back to our listeners. What about you? Like, after hearing all this, how do you feel about this whole trash the dress trend?
Yeah, where do you stand on this? Is it fun?
Yeah.
Is it wasteful? Is it somewhere in between? Like, there's no right answer here, but it's interesting to think about, right?
And here's another question for you to think about. What if you could trash something? Not a physical object, but like an idea or a tradition? What would that be?
Yeah. Like, is there a societal expectation out there that just feels outdated? Like, what if we could just shed all those pressures? Pressure to conform, to be perfect, like even the idea that there's only one right way to do things. We could just trash that.
That's kind of deep. It's like taking this whole trash the dress concept and applying it to like our own minds.
Yeah. It's about challenging those, like, rules and expectations that we just take for granted.
So maybe this whole trash the dresses thing, it's not really about the dress at all. It's about like questioning those things that might be holding us back.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that wraps up our deep dive into trash the dress. Hopefully it's given you some things to think about.
Yeah, keep questioning those assumptions.
Yes. And until next time, happy diving, everyone.